Tonight, as we've said a few times, we are here to observe Pride Shabbat. And each year we come together in a slightly different way to honor the fact that June is Pride Month, to honor the fact that queer people deserve a special bit of representation, an extra shout out, an extra bit of love every single year. And you may feel that at CBE every Shabbat is Pride Shabbat, but it isn't. Just this one. In Parshat Beha'alotcha, we read in this third parsha of the book of Numbers, we read yet another version of an accounting of the people of Israel. And we read that every single one of the tribes, as they go off into battle, is accounted by their degel, by their flag, by their standard. And the degel, the flag, is distinct for each individual tribe. And this is actually a callback to an earlier parsha, the first parsha in Bamidbar, in Parshat Bamidbar, in chapter 2 of Numbers. We read that each tribe is recognized, and in fact, each individual is recognized, ish al diglo, meaning every person by his or their flag. And you can imagine where this might be going. But Rashi, in the 10th century, reads that phrase, ish al diglo, from Bamidbar, to mean that not only did every tribe, every grouping have its own flag, but every individual had a flag with their own shape and their own color. And he goes on to say that the people of Israel had a pride flag. That was a laugh line, but okay. And where we're going with this is that every single tribe, every single individual in ancient Israel had a unique shape, a unique story, something important to offer the collective. These censuses that we've been working through in the book of Bamidbar have all been in the spirit of naming who are these people, each with their own flag, each with their own flavor, each with something to offer. That is, of course, why the pride flag exists, the flag of many colors. And tonight, we are going to hear from 3 different individuals from this community who each represent parts of the LGBTQ community and hear a little bit of their experience and their wisdom here tonight. So I'm going to name all of them, and then I'm going to introduce each of them individually. We've got May Solomon Feliciano, as well as Lisa Badner and David Ball, each of whom I've asked to share just a very short reflection, as we've done throughout this year, about what this all means to them and about some bit of their experience. So first, I'd like to call forward May Solomon Feliciano to offer us a few words. Come on up. And thank you, May. Now, I should note that though I don't want to embarrass you, you can probably just stand here. I think we're not going to sit in the chairs, we're just going to stand here, but I don't want to embarrass you, but you are the youngest person that is speaking tonight, and yet you have been here the longest. So now you know. You're welcome to read it if you want.
Yeah, I'm going to read it. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Yes, hello. I'm May Testa Solomon Feliciano, and I am a grateful transgender woman. And I'm also Jewish. I'm a member here. I grew up at CBE, and Rabbi Green asked me if I would reflect on how I see Judaism and queerness intersecting in my life. And it wasn't until recently that I truly felt that they did intersect, because they were almost 2 separate chapters in my life. Growing up, I had a Jewish upbringing. I attended Yachad here. I had a bar mitzvah. But other than that, I didn't really understand what being Jewish meant to me. And that was a struggle, along with many other struggles at the time. And that sort of caused me to fall away from here, from CBE, from being Jewish. Because the next chapter for me was sort of coming out as trans, which really commanded all my focus. And since we are in the Book of Numbers, or it's called Bamidbar, I find that especially funny because I came out literally in the wilderness. I was in the forest in Oregon. I came out at 16 and I was away for 2 years, and so it felt like I left and came back a different person. And Rabbi Timona was really the person who kept me tethered to CBE, to Judaism, knowing her and who she is as a person, but also knowing that we have LGBT rabbis, like people like me, was really important to know. And talking with her was like one of the biggest helps, and I'm forever grateful to her and her voice in my life, and counting down the days until she's back. And still, even with that, like it took me a few years to really connect back to here. And I have since gotten to a point in my life, in my transition, where I'm happy and I love myself, and I finally get to love myself here as a queer Jew. But it was definitely slow at first, but after October 7th, I realized that I felt like I needed to be Jewish, and I'm still figuring out what that means to me, but it's given me a chance to come back to CBE and really find a way to sort of connect these two things. It helps to have Pride Shabbat every Shabbat. Just a little bit. But this has really been like a new chapter for me, finding a way to marry these two parts of my life, since they're both two things that are very personal to me, and they also give a lot of meaning to each other. CBE has offered a home for me, and now it is the place where I feel most at home. And I'm staying more involved, and I finally feel like I'm finding my people. And it's been difficult to be a trans person. It's been difficult to be a Jewish person. And as of recent, it's been very difficult to be both. But I know that I can come home here to CBE and figure it out one day at a time. So thank you all for being here, and glad we're all celebrating together, and Shabbat Shalom.
Yasher Koach May. And next we'll hear from Lisa Badner.
Shabbat Shalom. So Matt asked me to say a few words, so I immediately felt a bizarre need to give an empirical, albeit flawed historical overview with a few non sequiturs that only someone who came out in the 1980s could provide. So back then, in the 80s and 90s, the larger Jewish community was not particularly welcoming. And here's my woe is me part. I was never invited as a +1 to any cousin's wedding, even when I had a +1. One relative made it known I was no longer welcome in their home. To further fuel the division, my parents begged me to go to Israel, hoping it might turn me a little straighter. Encouraged by the anti-Semitic, microaggressive barbs from friends on the left, I went to Israel, and I stayed for 2 years. I could have sworn all the women on kibbutz were gay, and none of them were. So the community in Israel was underground and clandestine. You had to seek it out to find it, which I did. Things have evolved tremendously in my Jewish world, in the Jewish world, well, in the reasonable Jewish world. This space exemplifies this, that we have an eclectic congregation with straight and LGBT members and a pretty queer-leaning clergy would have been, to me, in the 80s, unthinkable. On the other hand, and here's where things have moved in opposite directions, from earlier years of identity politics, there was room to explore being Jewish within at least the lesbian community. And being Jewish was not, in my experience, mostly met with hostility. Back then, there was even a fascination with being Jewish, at least in the lesbian community. Everybody I knew had a copy of Nice Jewish Girls. It's a lesbian anthology. And Yours in Struggle, 3 feminist perspectives on anti-Semitism and racism. Being Jewish was a facet of identity to be mined in the identity politics heyday. Sometimes it was even a fetish. For example, and here's my non sequitur, I guess. In Madison, Wisconsin, where I lived for a while, there was an imposter who pretended to be ex-Hasidic Jewish from Brooklyn. She went by a Hebrew name. She learned Yiddish. She taught Yiddish to the Madison lesbians. She launched a nationwide organization of lesbian daughters of Holocaust survivors, of which she claimed to be one, and led popular support and prayer groups until her ex-girlfriend came to town and blew her cover that she was a Catholic girl from Milwaukee who had never even been to Brooklyn. So, all this to say, as there has been a gradual queering of Jewish life, there has been a striking de-Jewing of queer life. Intersectionality has grown at the exclusion of and hostility to Jews. The Brooklyn Pride Interfaith Service, which was to be held at Kane Street Synagogue, has been canceled. The New York City Dyke March, which has joined all the others now to explicitly exclude Zionists, with no nuance and no curiosity as to what that might mean. And I can go on and on. So my point, I am thankful to this space that I come to every Friday night that is open and warm and nuanced and diverse and queer and not queer and Jewish and everything. So Shabbat Shalom and happy Pride.
Thank you, Lisa. Yasher Koach. And finally,
I didn't plan this.
okay, come on up, David. And finally, we'll hear now from David Ball.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. 490 words. I counted. That's good. So at age 62, I'm old enough to have the advantage and the curse of hindsight. And for that reason alone, Pride has been sort of a bittersweet month for me. The household I grew up in was one of Polish and German refugees. They saw themselves as different. We're not like the Americans. European survivors, Jews. Secrecy, or at least discretion, were the norm. Besides sex, many topics were off limits. The theory being that if you didn't talk about it and you just swept it under the rug, it would go away on its own. When I was in second grade at PS 135 in East Flatbush, I had a teacher. She pulled me aside one day and she said, "You're special." I didn't know what she meant. And when I came out to my family at age 36, yes, 36. Imagine living in daily fear of being outed, of being blackmailed, of having unimaginable things done, of broaching the unbroachable because of the time that I grew up in. Those younger than me theoretically have it easier in some ways. I say theoretically because I'm not younger. At least, though, you didn't have to live through the hell of criminalized homosexuality. During Pride, sometimes being 60 plus, frankly, makes me envious of those who are 20, 30, or 40 years younger than I am. There was always the palpable fear that my professional future would be irretrievably lost. I studied international relations at American University in Washington. I interned during summers at the Communist Visa section of the State Department. That was the 80s. The mere suspicion of being gay was enough to keep you out of the Foreign Service. I applied for the Foreign Service. Passed all the tests. Was never appointed. And years later, uncomfortably came across classmates and acquaintances who had ceased talking to me, who had been interrogated by FBI agents during the security clearance process that lasted a year and a half. And I said, what type of things did they ask you? The only thing that any of them mentioned was my, as yet, non-existent dating history and preferences. So you may be thinking, what does Pride Month have to do with being Jewish? And here, you stole my thunder. I don't know how this happened. Okay, because I have it written here, you can see it. Believe me, reading Leviticus did not offer much comfort to a closeted, sexually confused teenager. We just ended Shavuot, which marks when the Jews received the Torah from God at Mount Sinai. Now, I have a master's degree in theology. My specialty was Semitic languages, Hebrew and Arabic. When the altar in the Sinai desert was ready, the representatives of the 12 tribes were each commanded Numbers 7. For those of you interested in the Parsha, it's Naso, right? Okay. To bring exactly the same offerings. Exactly. Down to the shekel. Exactly the same, and it's recounted in painstaking detail. All of the 12 tribes. But the tribes and their representatives are all individually named, and the numbers of the individuals of each tribe are recorded. Why? Why? Well, I'll tell you what I think. We weren't meant to be clones. What we give to God and the world is meant to be filtered through our individuality. We Jews, let's face it, number less than 0.2% of the world's population. But each of us is different, bringing a unique mosaic of talents and interests to the constellation of Am Yisrael. All of us, individually and collectively, shine differently. We are the covenant people, yes. We are the chosen people. Not because we're blameless, not because we're morally superior. We're not. Just read the story of King David sometime, okay? But because more is expected of us. In Leviticus 19, you shall love your neighbors as yourself. In Isaiah 42, we Jews are a light to the nations. So, our covenant, our identity is a precious gift. But concomitantly, it's a burden, an obligation, and not a small one, a big one. This Pride Month, I challenge each of you, amid all the joy and the pain, because with joy there's always pain. Ask yourselves, are we Jews willing to pay the price? Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Yasher Koach, David. David, Lisa, and May, thank you so much for your words. It is so important to hear from people in this community. It's so important to hear different voices, especially on a day like Pride Shabbat. So thank you. And each of you offered such different reflections, all of which were especially resonant for us tonight. In a moment, we will transition to the rest of our service, but I just want to note that as I asked Lisa earlier, a while ago, to reflect tonight, she said, oh, if I'm speaking, does that mean you're not going to say the thing you say every year? And I said, yeah, I think that's what it means. So I'm not going to say what I say every year, but I will summarize, which is that I think exemplified by what each of the three of you shared, that there is a way in which some pintele yid, some inherent Jewishness within all of us, is a little different. And it's not just about being queer, it's about being a Jew. That to be a Jew is to look through or look at the world through a lens that is a little bit different. And hopefully, it pushes us to think differently and grow and push our world to be better. The final note I will add is that in the words of Eugene Borowitz, one of the last great public intellectuals of the Reform movement, he said that to be Jewish is to be creatively alienated, which is to say, how, you like that? Yeah. You do, okay. Which is to say that every Jew is in a given society enough to care about it, but on its fringes enough to see its flaws. And it is for that reason that Jews have historically pushed society forward in every way. That is the reason, not bloodline, but the way in which we understand ourselves as a little bit different, a little bit queer, that we have benefited the world, that we, through our industry, through our art, through our science, through whatever it is, that because we are a little bit different, we've been able to be in Or L'Goyim, as you pointed out from the books of prophets, a light unto the nations. And so each of us on this Pride Shabbat and forward, may we find that creative alienation, may we look through the world through a lens that's a little bit different, that is inherent to who we are uniquely as Jews, and may that lens be a vessel for us, an avenue for us to make the world a little bit better. Shabbat Shalom.